Just going to do some more inking tonight. Might as well start. I'm one of these guys that I have worked a graveyard shift before and kind of dug it when I did it. It eventually wears the body down. You don't really work all night into the night. You flip your patterns, yes, but it's not the way people are meant to function. And so it eventually gets to you. But I do like, I don't know what it is. I say, okay, let's go. And procrastination stops right about, what is it? It's almost 11 p.m. here. So here we go. All of a sudden I'm ready to draw. And should be thankful I'm ready. You know, everyone does it to themselves. You make comparisons to what you're getting up to as an artist versus other artists. And like that line I just now pulled. It's hard not to say, okay, why am I even bothering to do this? It's because, you know, you can always find somebody that's just, you're not even in their league, you're not close to them. So why are you bothering? You are bothering because things like the word hack exist. It's a derivative term acting like somewhere there's someone that is achieving levels of high art at all time. Not really. Hack is kind of a word of loathing that probably that guy that was hoping he was going to be achieving high work at all time, he probably coined it. It's just doesn't exist. You do your bit, you chunk away at it, and all of a sudden you've got something that is yours. It's where you're at when you did it. If there is improvement left in you, it may happen. Let it happen if it does. But you know what you did in the moment. And you'll be surprised, some of this stuff you absolutely can't stand to look at, which I had many phases like that. You will then find yourself coming back to it and say, look at that. Good Lord, I did that. And it's like you've got a new filter for it, and you say, man, I'm glad I put the effort in on that. Because, you know, it's kind of fun to have here marking my my time on Earth. Yeah. You should have a kind of a critique going on in your mind on your stuff. You should disallow this and that when you see it being generated. But you know, right now, if I were to stop everything and say, Ellis, can't you draw better than this? Things would stop. So part of it is the digital of it. Obviously, to cure that, I would just say, okay, stopping now. We will now switch back to pencil and paper and micron pens or something. I'll use some tool that I can handle that produces a better result. And no, I am determined to get the callus on whatever part of my soul needs it that allows me to be a digital inker and artist. And that is just the way it is. And this is not, you know, it's not killing me to do it this way. I mean, it's not killing me to look at what I'm producing. Eyeballing what is straight up and down is a bit of, because I'm eyeballing the straight up and down of it all. So look at that, I nailed it. That's an interesting thing. I was going to comment about this, and I'll do another little, whatever these are, semi-lectures of about our eyes, about how we all have calipers that we really should trust. I've defined drawing in the past as, you know, just being kind of simplistic, but also being dead on about it, really. That drawing is measuring. I can take a quick break and give a semi-lesson here on another layer. Save it. Get rid of this. Get up a layer. Just to quickly say what I'm talking about. Well, almost everything you've ever learned about Loomis, you or anybody else, all of a sudden there that measurement is down. Now you can, so in other words, 2 points give you the measure of what is going to be a head, if that's a face. Now this is this goes to the whole point of trust that caliper in your eyes, whether things are level or not or whatever. This measurement, if I say, you know, and I used to use the term, don't let the page push you around. Get it measured before you start running out of paper to depict what you're up to. Guys like Kirby, I really wish that during Kirby's life somebody had gone to the sake of slavishly recording a couple things he did. You know, allegedly, you know, he would start in the upper left and go down the lower right, and he did such savage cuts and crops on what he was up to, you know. And you would think someone would need to light table what they were up to on that, but he just, I don't know. I would really like to know how he managed to do that, because that's the deal. People get too precious about it, and they start thinking about an entire figure, and you know, the information you get from a partial figure, especially if something you want to dramatize stuff doing, you know, this partial figure going into the frame exactly like, well, not exactly like, obviously, like Kirby would have done in terms of like cropping something, you know. That would, that's tells you more than having those figures nicely situated within the frame. What else was I going to say about measuring, though? See, I mean, this information could be finished, and but if you were to want all this, that's what I was going to say. If you wanted all this information on there, at the moment you have something as big as your torso down, you've measured. So at that point, you know about how long it's going to, how much it's going to require for you to get all that figure in there. You're just trust the moment you get that down, you can now assume you've got your measurement. you've got your scale. So it's like no big issue to figure that I can fit all that in there. Of course, just saw using the transform tool is also a great way to do it. Just go at it until you can transform it. Digital is beautiful. Yeah, I almost don't feel like deleting that. Anyway, because that's another thing I've got to work on. It's like on this digital magic, it's like, see, I'm so close right now. My line weight is now not consistent. I've gotten in close to make myself happy with the look of something, and I needed to be farther out to be agreeing with the line weights. Oh well, that means double the work if you do that. So you don't want to do that. You gotta cast a critical eye on these things early. Which might help if I bring the brush size up. See, it hurts. I've got a local artist's artwork pinned up to where I can see it now over the door of my studio, because it's a she has a very scrappy approach that is full of energy. It's exactly what I ought to be doing in terms of, like, seeing as how I've only trained myself up for scrappy art, if I've decided that's all I can do, and I am not going to train myself toward being a Scott Williams inking level genius, and that it's only going to be like sketch level, like this stuff. It needs to have quicker resolution. It needs to have like that going on. It needs to say, okay, get it down confidently. It's good to be thinking out loud, huh, and trying to get it done. Let's see if we can maybe get a few strokes that look like they belong on here. Oops, that didn't look right. Undo. I was being mocked while I was, I was invited and I was mocked. Doug had me on his one of his shows just as a open invite. You show up and then he mocks you for still working on the same thing. And as he pointed out, I may have already said this, what are you working on? You know, you've been working on that. What is it? And he asked how long it was, like I was in the midst of a graphic novel or something. I said, well, it's a 3-page strip. And he goes, that's one day's work. He's right. But I'm taking about a month. I've got all this hard stuff done. I've got all the lettering. Everything's done except for this final bit of line work. I've done all the pencils to the extent that, you know, they're pencils that you can do this to it, over it. Another thing I don't use the tool often enough with is, like, I could, and this is, you know, if I get something right once, duplicate it. Let's try that. What I'm going to be in about this space here. Let's drag this over to this. Press Alt. That was easy. some line, you know, try to get some cheap labor here. Use the tool. This will have a very cursory bit of color. I'm crazy in love with Darwin Cook's Parker books, and that single jab saying, what is my halftone? Why, that halftone is a single solid color, and I just love the look of that. And I like and of course combined with his brilliant bit of minimalism on, I guess that's the word you use for what he's up to with it, minimalism. It's obviously an animator's minimalism. He's designed for animation in the past. He knows what's a wasted effort and what's worth putting down as far as information, as far as a read. He's just a really great artist. It's a shame he's gone. He was allegedly going to get back to Parker and you know, continue that product, but you know, he got a little burned out on it toward the very end, and that, you know, that's going to happen when you just think of all the artists that you wish would never give up on your favorite title. They must love it, right? They've done 5 years worth of work on it. No, they hate it. They wish they could be doing anything. They had that one guy that was the huge fan favorite. What's his name? He used to do all the Teen Titans. I shouldn't have his name. And the fan favorite status probably comes from, you know, being the exact opposite of me. He's probably a detailed guy that gets it done with a great deal of appeal, with a minimum of mess, puts it down in a way that, you know, the eye is just really pleased with what little is there. What was his name? I think his first name was George. I could look it up, but I'm not going to. I've got my brush set to clear right now, using it to do some erasure. I guess a guy can stream like this for... Well, I just saw that Blacklist Universe had a 6-hour chunk. I guess they streamed it. As far as I know, you can do that, but I'm not going to be working for 6 hours. I'm sure of that much. Isn't that interesting? I guess I printed this out at one point, and then, yeah, I did. Yeah, and so I've got the dot pattern that the printer uses. That's part of my blue line. That's kind of cool. Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, I took the very generalized big shape blacks I had done and printed those out, and you know, as a tone, and then came along and did some very direct pen work right into those inverse versus pencils. Sometimes if my line as it comes out of a pen, it just to me, I'm thinking I'm getting to it. You know, I'm talking about not being precious. And if I've got a flexi nib web, not a brush pen in my hand, that's what I had with this bit of line work. You see, I'm tracing over, not necessarily improving all that much, but at least it doesn't have a, you know, I'm calling it more finished. You know, it won't have two lines to depict one line. It'll have one line. That's how I'm cleaning it up. But that technique worked kind of cool. And then I scan it again, and you know, put it into Photoshop, turn it into a blue line. And here I am tracing up over it. Might work for you. You know, I come up with these little my little explorations that I come up with in terms of like coming up with little approaches on Photoshop and stuff like that. I'll be half asleep and I'll say, hey, I gotta do that. That's pretty obvious that a guy could be doing that. And you know, I won't trust myself. I'll get out of bed and then have to write it down on a post-it or something, which is a good idea. You know, I mean, wake up in the morning and think, wait a minute, I had a brainstorm, and you never recover it. Well, don't want to do that. Brainstorms are got a little measurement pushing me around here. See, I made that digit longer than it needs to be. Up to the top. I just think of this as taking a break where I go up to the top and switch it from normal to clear. I just wish there was just a quicker hotkey way I could get to it. I have done some research, you know, the usual forum search into other people trying to solve it, and closest I've come to it is like someone say, well, you just hit E, and you could have the eraser set up. Say I said, okay, my eraser then is this preset brush that goes to clear, and that could be one way to do it, but see what I like right now. If I hit E, I don't even know what eraser I get out of it. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, you know what, I may just be going to E from now on, because it is a very hard edge. Okay, now I'm on E. See, all I have to do is make that bigger. Yeah, you just have to do that. You don't want one that's, you know, you might want one if you were painting something where it's got an airbrush kind of softness to it. In this case, I want one that's just about that big. This one is sensitive to, this preset is called, it's from a Kyle brush, it's called Clean as a Whistle, and I'm just using it for everything on this strip. It's let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. See, right away I took too much out, whereas I wouldn't have done that if I'd gone to the top and switched to E, or switched to clear. Now I've got quite a mess of information on drawing a hand here. Let's see if this cleans up as I draw it. Hands, if you'll just kind of, me being the expert on hands, my hands are pretty shaky pretty often. But the hands, you want to make them gather as how they radiate and gather together. You can have a kind of a flipped out hand, you know, that obviously you can study the poses that your hands are capable of, and you can get all kinds of Bela Lugosi poses out of them. But for the most part, your fingers want to kind of stay together and kind of share what they're up to in terms of like how they basically form up a kind of pointed mitten that goes toward the same, you know, direction. Again, I probably, and that's a little big for that child hand. Let's bring that down a little bit. And make it match the other one. Of course, there I'm messing with my weights. Got redundant work to do to bring the weights back up. I have a podcast, a movie discussion podcast I do with a couple of three pals of mine that Barry Burris, Scott Sackett, D.L. Nelson, and it's called Classic Cinema Podcast. Classic Cinema Podcast. Look for it. Search with that. You'll find it. And we just did one called on Freebie and the Bean. Now, I had picked this because it just seemed like such a rarity that I could, you know, come forward with anything that I hadn't seen. And it seemed like, wow, this is, you know, this is movie night. I ought to try to occasionally give myself the experience of seeing it for the first time, so that I'm reacting as like, wow, quite a movie. But since our cutoff is 1974, that's what we're calling classics. Everything that occurred before the advent of the blockbuster, which, you know, starts with Jaws, which is 1975. So everything before 1975, if it's genre, I'm probably exposed to it. I've probably seen it. You know, I mean, if it's anything I was likely to watch, I've watched it. So it's tough. So I ran across, I forget, probably just being on Warner Brothers mailing list probably exposed me to it again or something. Freebie and the Bean is hard to find. In terms of like, you have to, I think, have it delivered to you as a, you know, print-on-demand disc. So this fellow had a copy of it, and I said, let's watch that, because it has the distinction of being the first proto cop movie we've all gotten used to. So I said, well, it's got to be good. It's got Alan Arkin in it. It's got, you know, James Caan. It's directed by a guy that did himself well when he did a movie called Stuntman. Got an Academy Award nomination. I don't know if he won or not, for Peter O'Toole. Got a lot of notice So torture for Scott. He really didn't like it. Dave D.L. Nelson, he liked it, and I liked it. I liked the experience of watching it. Barry was, he was harsh on it, and it deserves having a harsh appraisal of it because it is a mess. But it was unique. I don't know how to describe it. What is messy about it? It's two movies. It's like Alan Arkin and James Caan went to the trouble of getting to know their characters. They went to the trouble of like having a meeting to where they got to know their guys and did improv, worked them all out, and then did this kind of like thing for the director where the director is faced with like just I think turning the camera on them while they're doing their shtick, and their shtick is overlapping dialogue at all times, which was instantly headache inducing. And the story is so sloppy. It's sloppy, and yet it has the hallmarks of what would be a non-condescending way to tell a story, which is to say, assume the audience is smart enough to follow you on what you're up to. And sure enough, I mean, the story is so simple that, yeah, you can figure out what they're up to, but it's all carried with, just following these guys around. There's no exposition of anybody. There's just dialogue that goes on. And like I say, dialogue that is, it can be a headache-inducing thing when you're talking over your fellow actor. Always. It's, Howard Hawks used that. And it's in the thing, but typically the overlap was toward the very end of somebody's conversation, someone finishing a thought for them, or punching up what they may have said, or making a joke. And MASH, of course, that was really big at the time. Overlapping dialogue, that's the hallmark of an Altman film. It's always, says the man who would no more be an actor. You gave him 100 years to work on it. But we all like story. Can't get away from that. I'm telling a story here. Oops. Just taking me a... See, I've decided I don't want this big palm reveal here if I'm going to get around to another piece of anatomy that's plausible. In terms of like what owns what, what's behind, what's in front. I don't like that either. Like that a lot better. But see, the eye is measuring that. It says, do those hands belong on the same person? And they don't. And when your calipers tell you that two things are not the same size, not the same scale. It is time to take steps. Change it. Easier said than done when you, that's why you'd have to have your pencils totally worked out. Whereas my pencils, like I told you, mine are directly brush pen to in the middle of a tone. Now I'm trying to redecipher what what I drew then. I do like this rotate because it's quick and easy to get out of. You hit B, you're back to your brush. I've got a friend loaned me the newest Suspiria. May watch that tonight. I'm a big fan of the Argento one. I just watched Red Letter Media do a review of the old one. And it's fun to listen to fairly smart people talk about movies like that and get their take on it. Fairly smart people. I like the Red Letter Media people. I like that they, you know, someday I will own Space Cop. I don't know what their deal is. It's like, why don't you go to the trouble of offering it on Amazon as well as your own little shop environment? That's where I would be an automatic purchaser of your product. But they only have their own little store for it. And I've never stepped off and bought it. Which I really want it. I want to see what those guys in their little frozen state you know, because they obviously, I mean, they can critique a movie, and you know, and I want to see what they produced when they ran into their own limitations, and they've done it before. That's the deal. They plug away at it. I assume the next Space Cop will be better, but I imagine they probably spent some money, probably didn't see the return on it, and that money factor, if you see money just disappear, it takes you a while to talk yourself into doing that again. Okay, I think I'm going to do this last panel here offline, even though it's the more interesting panel, and do a bunch of touch-ups and try to finish this page tonight. But I'm going to quit streaming because I want to get up and get coffee, get normal. And, you know, you got to admit, this isn't normal.